This program is supported by
SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to our program. And now for tonight's headlines.
U.S. company Moderna requested emergency authorization of its vaccine in the U.S. and Europe after results confirmed it is 94.1% effective against the virus. And if approved, the first of the drug's 2 doses could be injected into the arms of millions of Americans by the middle of December.
Hong Kong and Singapore on Tuesday indefinitely delayed a travel bubble in a new blow to their hard-hit tourism and aviation industries as the Chinese city battles a coronavirus surge.
And Vietnam reported its first local transmission of COVID-19 in nearly 3 months, with officials scrambling to prevent a wider outbreak in the country's most populous city.
And an 18-meter-high replica of a Gundam Robot comes alive at a media preview near the port of Yokohama in Japan.
U.S. firm Moderna said it would file requests for emergency authorization of its COVID-19 vaccine in the U.S. and Europe after full results confirmed a high efficacy estimated at 94.1%. The highly anticipated news comes as the U.S. braces for a supercharged post-Thanksgiving coronavirus surge. More than 265,000 Americans have died from the disease, and 93,000 are currently hospitalized. The company's CEO, Stefan Bancel, said, quote, "We believe that our vaccine will provide a new and powerful tool that may change the course of this pandemic and help prevent severe disease, hospitalizations, and death," unquote. If the U.S. Food and Drug Administration agrees it is safe and effective, the first of the drug's 2 doses could be injected into the arms of millions of Americans by the middle of December. American pharmaceutical Pfizer and Germany's BioNTech applied for similar approvals last week, and their vaccine could be greenlit in the U.S. shortly after December 10.
In an interview on CBS this morning, U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar says that if everything is on track, a vaccine for COVID-19 from U.S. pharmaceutical company Pfizer could be approved within days of an advisory committee meeting on December 10 to discuss an emergency authorization, and one from U.S. biotech firm Moderna could be approved the week after. Watch this.
With Pfizer, we at the FDA announced an advisory committee for December the 10th, and if everything is on track, everything proves out what it appears to be, we could be looking at approval within days after that. Moderna is basically 1 week behind that, and General Perna has said from Operation Warp Speed that we'll ship within 24 hours of FDA authorization. So we could be seeing both of these vaccines out and getting into people's arms before Christmas. Hope that we'll be on radio this week and then getting on TV soon thereafter to help educate people about these vaccines. You know, Tony, one interesting thing, we've actually had to go back to as we call it, the whiteboarding on these campaigns, because the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are so highly effective in these clinical trials. We've actually had to make some edits to our campaign materials to take account of that. And then the most important thing we're doing is we're keeping politics out of the process. You know, there's a very sad and sorry history in connection with some aspects of clinical trial research that have happened in the past. That's why we've been so very focused to ensure significant minority community enrollment in these clinical trials. And the latest Moderna data out today from the full clinical trial demonstrate, I think 30% of those in the trials were from underserved communities, especially our African American and our Latinx communities. So we have a very robust population that participate in the studies to be very sensitive. You know, the other side was complaining if we were to put campaigns out to educate people about the vaccine before the election. There was a lot of concern expressed about that. We held those campaigns back. But also you want to time it just right. You can't condition a market a month, 2 months before general vaccine availability. You just won't have the effect. So you want to time it really right in sequence with vaccine availability so that you really have that call to action that will have the maximum effect. So no, the timing is right on.
The FDA is scheduled to meet on December 10 to consider Pfizer's request for emergency use authorization. Moderna says it has received word that its FDA hearing will be on December 17th. According to Health and Human Services Secretary Azar, once the FDA approves a vaccine, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices will meet within 24 hours to finalize plans for distribution. The vaccine, he said, will be shipped out to states beginning 24 hours after the FDA grants approval.
So the question now is who will get the coronavirus vaccine first? Health Secretary Azar said governors will determine who gets priority. Let's listen in.
With Pfizer, we at the FDA announced an advisory committee for December the 10th, and if everything is on track, everything proves out what it appears to be, we could be looking at approval within days after that. Moderna is basically 1 week behind that. And General Perna has said from Operation Warp Speed that we'll ship within 24 hours of FDA authorization. So we could be seeing both of these vaccines out and getting into people's arms before Christmas. Hope that we'll be on radio this week and then getting on TV soon thereafter to help educate people about these vaccines. You know, Tony, one interesting thing, we've actually had to go back to as we call it, the whiteboarding on these campaigns because the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are so highly effective in these clinical trials. We've actually had to make some edits to our campaign materials to take account of that. And then the most important thing we're doing is we're keeping politics out of the process. You know, there's a very sad and sorry history in connection with some aspects of clinical trial research that have happened in the past. That's why we've been so focused, so very focused to ensure significant minority community enrollment in these clinical trials. And the latest Moderna data out today from the full clinical trial demonstrate, I think 30% of those in the trials were from underserved communities, especially our African American and our Latinx communities. So we have a very robust population that participate in the studies to be very sensitive. You know, the other side was complaining if we were to put campaigns out to educate people about the vaccine before the election. There was a lot of concern expressed about that. We held those campaigns back. But also you want to time it just right. You can't condition a market a month, 2 months before general vaccine availability. You just won't have the effect. So you want to time it really right in sequence with vaccine availability so that you really have that call to action that will have the maximum effect. So no, the timing is right on.
Now, the Health Secretary told CBS this morning, co-host Tony Duckapil, that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will create recommendations to prioritize vaccine distribution. As of Monday, the U.S. has had more than 13 million reported cases of the virus. More than 266,000 people have died, with at least one American dying of coronavirus every minute. There have been 4.2 million cases diagnosed in November, double the number last month. And COVID-related hospitalizations in the U.S. are also at their highest point ever, nearly 100,000, and officials are warning it could soon get even worse with what they're calling a surge upon a surge after Thanksgiving. Okay, so we have on the line, joining us live from the United Kingdom, is our EBC correspondent, Aribel Celestino. Hello, Aribel.
Hello, Alma. And
Hello.
yes, for our update today, we will have the headline is monotonous MPs to vote on England's post-lockdown COVID curbs. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government battled Tuesday to defuse a party revolt as lawmakers prepare to vote on tough new COVID restrictions to replace an England-wide lockdown. As you know, Alma, the month-long stay-at-home order ends at midnight GMT, and the Conservative government plans to restore regionalized restrictions dependent on coronavirus rates in different parts of England. While London will escape the toughest Tier 3 rules, more than 23 million people will fall into the category, including in some affluent Conservative-held constituency, forcing hospitality and leisure facilities to remain closed. Senior Minister Michael Gove said, "We are all grimly aware of the impact on struggling businesses after the collapse of clothing retail group Arcadia threw the future of 13,000 jobs into doubt." But interviewed on BBC Radio, he stressed, "What would the effect be on the economy if the NHS National Health Service was overwhelmed? Isolated hotspots means entire countries are due to enter Tier 3 despite their infection rates remaining below the English average. That has prompted outrage from dozens of Conservative MPs who are threatening to vote against the plan when it comes to a vote later Tuesday in Parliament." Well, Gove, however, pointed to the experience of the devolved government in Wales, which he said he is having to slam the brakes on again, with new curbs on hospitality venues despite a 2-week lockdown last month. Britain has been Europe's worst hit country during the pandemic, and with recording of more than 58,000 deaths from some 1.6 million cases. And the UK government, which sets health policy for England, late Monday released a wider assessment to accompany the parliamentary debate after restive MPs demanded more clarity on the effects for the recession-hit economy of the latest restrictions. And angering the rebels, the dossier said it was impossible to state with confidence what would be the economic impact on lifting the controls. However, the alternative of allowing COVID-19 to grow exponentially is much worse for public health, it said. The government's view is that the severe loss of life and other health impacts of allowing the NHS to be overwhelmed would be intolerable for our society. Tory MP Mark Harper, one of the rebel wrangle leaders, said the government's assessment seems to be collapsing under the glare of scrutiny. He said that the government had repeatedly failed to the detail of kind projects outlined anew by Gove, showing mounting pressure on the state-run hospitals. "We're now seeing once again the wheels are coming off the government's arguments," Harper tweeted. Johnson's has a 80-seat majority in the House of Commons, and the main opposition Labour says it will abstain in the vote, refusing for the first time in the pandemic to support the Prime Minister's response. Labour is demanding the government offer more help for businesses and for low-paid workers forced to self-isolate. Its abstention should mean the new curbs pass. But a sizable Tory revolt will embarrass Johnson and could foreshadow other parliamentary battles to come, including over the terms of Britain's Brexit divorce from the European Union. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Aribel, you mentioned about the Labour Party demanding more help for businesses from the government. What is the current situation of businesses there? I just read up some news about... Yes, go ahead.
At the moment, there is a collapse of 2 UK retailers, Debenhams and Topshop owner Arcadia, as mentioned earlier, 2 of them Britain's biggest clothing retailers. Following the coronavirus fallout and fierce online competition, there is a risk of the loss of 25,000 jobs. The British department store chain Debenhams said it was set to close for business save for an unlikely rescue, meaning that around 12,000 jobs were set to go. And they made its announcement after the British clothing retailer Arcadia fell into administration on Monday, putting into risk a further 13,000 roles. This second lockdown in England has battered in particular the nation's retail and hospitality sectors. In fact, Debenhams, whose history dates back to the late 18th century, said in a statement that it would continue to trade through its 124 UK stores and online to clear stock. On conclusion of this process, if no alternative offers have been received, the UK operation will close, it added. Over to you, Alma.
All right, that's a lot of jobs set to go. All right, so looking forward to more updates there as we follow this developing story. Thank you very much, Aribel, for joining us tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Alma. Stay safe. Reporting from the United Kingdom, I am Aribel Celestino. We live in interesting times.
In other news, President Donald Trump's controversial coronavirus advisor Scott Atlas resigned on Monday, while hopes for a first wave of vaccinations before the end of 2020 received a further boost with an announcement from U.S. firm Moderna. Scott Atlas was a favored coronavirus advisor of the U.S. president and has submitted his resignation effective as of today, according to Fox News. He thanked Trump for the honor, and he also wished all the best to President-elect Joe Biden's incoming administration. During his 4 months in the role, Dr. Atlas questioned the need for masks and other measures to control the pandemic. He also repeatedly clashed with other members of the coronavirus task force. He sparked further controversy last month when he tweeted, "People rise up," in response to new restrictions imposed in Michigan. In his resignation letter carried by Fox, he said his advice had always focused on minimizing all the harms from both the pandemic and the structural policies themselves, especially to the working class and poor.
America should prepare for a surge upon a surge in coronavirus cases as millions of travelers return home after the Thanksgiving holiday. That is according to the top U.S. scientist, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Travel surrounding Thursday's Thanksgiving holiday made this the busiest week in U.S. airports since the pandemic began. Let's listen in.
What we're seeing now, which is a confluence of entering into the cooler months of the late fall and the early winter, the holiday season where people congregate on indoor settings, wonderful, innocent things that we do socially with our family and our friends, having meals in congregate settings. The slope is done this. It's on an increment that is almost exponential, which is really dangerous situation to be in, particularly as we get deeper and deeper into the cold months of the winter, and we have the holiday coming up. So you ask a reasonable question. The trajectory is we're in a very precarious position. So the obvious question is, what are we going to do about it? What we have is maybe 5 fundamental public health measures that are pretty easy to implement. Uniform wearing of masks, keeping physical distances, 6 feet if you can possibly do that, avoiding crowds in congregate settings, particularly indoors. And that means typical things like gatherings in restaurants, gatherings at homes, where people other than the immediate family unit are together. The reason we say that is that the infection in the community level now is driven by people who are without symptoms, because about 40 to 45% of the people who are infected have no symptoms. And we know that a substantial proportion of the people who get infected from someone who doesn't even know they're infected. That's one of the reasons for the uniform wearing of masks. So we can do these things, and we can prevent an even further escalation. I referred to it on one of the Sunday shows yesterday as a surge superimposed upon a surge. What we've done now with Thanksgiving, Mark, we're not going to see the repercussions of that for 2 to 3 weeks from now. So because of the travel and people congregating for meals, etc., you don't see any difference for a day, 2, 3, 5 days. You see the difference 2 or 3 weeks from now, which would put it right at the time that people would be traveling for Christmas. So all things considered, we're not in a good place.
The UN said Tuesday that a record $35 billion would be needed for aid in 2021 as the global coronavirus pandemic leaves tens of millions of people in crisis and with the risk of multiple famines looming. The world body's Global Humanitarian Overview estimated that 235 million people worldwide will need some form of emergency assistance next year, a staggering 40% increase compared with 2020. Watch this.
The picture we are presenting is the bleakest and darkest perspective on humanitarian need in the period ahead that we have ever set out, I think. And that is a reflection of the fact that the COVID pandemic has wreaked carnage. So at the beginning of 2020, we thought that nearly 170 million people in the world would need humanitarian assistance this year. Coming into 2021, we think that's going to be 235 million people. That's a 40% increase. And the increase arises almost entirely because of COVID-19. And in order to deal with this set of problems, we are in the GHO setting out plans to reach 160 million of the most vulnerable people in 56 countries. And those plans, if they're fully financed, will cost $35 billion.
Next year, 1 in 33 people worldwide will be in need of aid, the report found, stressing that if all of them lived in one country, it would be the world's 5th largest nation. The annual appeal by UN agencies and other humanitarian organizations usually presents a depressing picture of soaring needs brought on by conflicts, displacement, natural disasters, and climate change.
Hong Kong and Singapore on Tuesday indefinitely delayed a travel bubble in a new blow into their hard-hit tourism and aviation industries as the Chinese city battles a coronavirus surge. The arrangement allowing people to travel between the financial hubs without quarantining had been due to launch on November 22. But it was postponed for 2 weeks as Hong Kong saw a sudden spike in cases. The decision was taken in view of the severity of the epidemic situation in Hong Kong, with the number of local cases of unknown sources increasing rapidly, according to the Hong Kong government in a statement. Singapore is a major market for Hong Kong's tourism industry, with more than 450,000 arrivals from the city-state recorded in 2019, according to the Hong Kong Tourism Board. Hong Kong was among the top 15 visitor sources for Singapore last year, with nearly 500,000 arrivals, according to official data. Hong Kong on Monday reimposed social distancing measures at some of their strictest levels since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, as daily cases rise sharply. Restrictions on public gatherings were tightened, with a maximum of 2 people allowed to meet, down from 4, while non-essential civil servants were asked to work from home.
Meanwhile, Vietnam reported its first local transmission of COVID-19 in nearly 3 months on Monday, with officials scrambling to prevent a wider outbreak in the country's most populous city. The communist nation was applauded earlier this year for controlling the pandemic with strict restrictions on movement, extensive quarantine measures, and a robust track and trace regime. But late on Monday, the health ministry announced that it had detected coronavirus in a 32-year-old man in Ho Chi Minh City, a relative of a Vietnam Airlines flight attendant who also tested positive on the weekend. A temporary lockdown has been made on the locations in the city where the patient had visited, the ministry said in a statement, adding that dozens of people in contact with the latest case had been put under quarantine. Vietnam has only recorded 1,347 coronavirus cases and 35 deaths across a country of 95 million. Life has almost returned to normal in the country over the past almost 3 months, despite a summer outbreak centered on the beach resort city of Da Nang that put health authorities back on high alert.
Meanwhile, President Duterte announced Monday night that Metro Manila or the National Capital Region will remain under general community quarantine for the month of December. Let's listen in.
Critics, upon the recommendation of the task force sa COVID-19, the following areas will be under general community quarantine from December 1 to 31. Let me explain. Alam mo kasi sa mga news, hapon-hapon, wala talagang social distancing, wala ang iba, hindi they did not wear mask. Ayaw nila. At matigas ang ulo. Now, let me remind you that Europe and America are experiencing what they would call, some say, the third wave na pagbalik. Mas marami ang nagkasakit ngayon at namatay. This is a country which is rich, na dapat may bakuna na can afford it. And yet, maraming nagkakasakit, namatay. For the simple reason, matigas ang ulo, ayaw. Ngayon, yung sa Pilipinas, pati itong mga critics, nga, bakit rumami? Bakit hindi rumami na lumabas na ang lahat? Bakit? Mapigilan mo? Papiliin na ng gobyerno? Mapakain ba ng gobyerno ang lahat? Yan ang istorya dyan. Kung hindi sila maglabas ng bahay, can you sustain their lives while inside the house? Nobody's buying food, hindi nakikita, walang trabaho, wala lahat. Kaya napipilitan lumabas. It's between hunger and the...
President Duterte renewed his call to the public to observe quarantine protocols such as frequent hand washing, physical distancing, and wearing of face masks and face shields. Metro Manila mayors earlier recommended retaining GCQ status for the rest of the year. The Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases expressed doubts over further relaxing quarantine restrictions as it may result in a possible spike in cases. The Department of Interior and Local Government earlier proposed to ban holiday parties, caroling, and other mass gatherings. Last week, President Duterte also reminded the public to strictly follow minimum health and safety protocols to prevent a post-holiday surge of infections. Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
Portion is brought to you by Canreef Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
The Metro Rail Transit 7, or MRT-7, is a planned rail and road project from North Avenue, Quezon City to San Jose del Monte, Bulacan, with 14 stations, which can service 650,000 passengers daily. And very soon, the construction of the new Manila International Airport in Bulacan, Bulacan is expected to accommodate 100 million passengers annually and promises to be another significant contribution to progress in the Philippines.
The overall tally of coronavirus disease or COVID-19 recoveries nationwide has risen to 398,782, with 135 new recovered cases reported on Tuesday. The Department of Health also reported 1,298 newly confirmed cases, bringing the total number of active cases to 25,725. Of the active cases, about 84% are mild, 7.4% are asymptomatic, 2.9% are severe, 0.30% are moderate, and 5.4% are in critical condition. The majority of the newly announced cases are from Ilocos Norte with 84 cases, Manila with 61, Quezon City with 55, Laguna with 50, and Negros Occidental with 47 new infections. According to the November 30 data of the DOH, about 1,004 or 5.7% out of the 17,699 tested turned out positive for COVID-19. The DOH, meanwhile, reported 27 new deaths, bringing the death toll to 8,418.
Meanwhile, the Philippine National Police recorded 33 new cases today, bringing the total number of police officers contracting the coronavirus disease to 8,136. From the total number of cases, PNP confirmed that 387 are still inactive cases. The PNP continues to expand their capacity to carry out the COVID-19 tests on their personnel. Next week, the PNP testing center in Cebu is expected to be inaugurated. The turnover ceremony for Police Regional Office 9 was canceled after incoming Regional Director PB Gen Ronnie Ilagan tested positive for COVID-19. Aside from Ilagan, the head of PNP Firearms and Explosive Office, PB Gen Romil Mitra, was also positive in the disease. Let's listen in.
Yan, nung nag-command conference kami na kuan. So yun, kaya hindi sila nakatay ng conference kasi nga mga positive na sila. And it's good because at least may early detection tayo.
Department of Interior and Local Government Secretary Eduardo said that the gradual expansion of the age groups allowed to go out of their homes and enter the malls will push through this holiday season, provided that they are accompanied by their parents. The guidelines for allowing minors to enter malls will be prepared by the Metro Manila Council and other local government units. Watch this.
Wala pong katulad po ng plano na hindi po papayagan party, hindi rin papayagan caroling, wala pong mass gathering. Yung pong family reunion ay isang considered na mass gathering. Katulad po ng sabi ni Secretary Duque, immediate family na lang sana. Ang kailangan po ang minimum health standard ay patutupad. Doon po sa pinag-utos natin na pwede ng gradual expansion ng mga age group para makalabas. Ang mga minors po, basta accompanied ng mga magulang, ay papayagang makalabas at makapunta sa mall. Ito po ay pagtitibayin sa mga ordinansa ng ating mga NCR mayors sa lugar po ng GCQ.
In October, the Metro Manila mayors discouraged the holding of holiday parties amid the threat of COVID-19, as well as the Catholic tradition of caroling. Experts noted that studies showed that individuals release respiratory droplets when singing, which may lead to getting the virus.
To the U.S. now, the elections chief in Georgia announced probes of alleged efforts to register ineligible or dead voters for 2 U.S. Senate runoffs. But Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, again rejected claims that President Trump lost the state because of fraud. Let's listen in.
There are those who are exploiting the emotions of many Trump supporters with fantastic claims, half-truths, misinformation, and frankly, they are misleading the president as well, apparently.
Georgia has certified that President-elect Biden had won the state by about 12,700 votes. Arizona, too, certified a Biden win by a little over 10,000 votes. And Wisconsin finished a partial recount, confirming another Biden victory.
In Iran, funeral services were held for the founder of the country's nuclear program. He died last week in an ambush that Iran blames on Israel. State TV shows mourners pay their respect to Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. Top security officials said that Israel used remote-controlled weapons in the attack. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani had on Saturday accused Israel of acting as a mercenary for the United States by carrying out the assassination. Israel has not commented on the statement.
And the rebel leader in Ethiopia's rebel region is insisting that fighting goes on even after losing his capital. Ethiopia's army seized the city of Mekelle over the weekend after nearly a month of fighting that killed and displaced thousands. Today, the nation's prime minister denied rebel claims of atrocities by the army. Let's listen in.
መቀሌ እኮ የኛ ነው፣ በእኛ ሀብት የተገነባ እኮ ነው። እንዴት እናፈርሰዋለን? አንድ ሰው በመቀሌ ኦፕሬሽን አንድ ሰው አደጋ አልደረሰበትም። ስፔሻል ፎርስ ስፔሻል ሰርጀሪ የሰራው
ይህም ሰራዊቱ በድል እንዲያቀና አስችሎታል።
ልማቶችን እያወደመ መሸሹን የተያያዘው የጁንታው ኃይል ከሽሬ፣ አክሱም፣ አድዋና ሌሎች በርካታ አካባቢዎች እግሬ አውጭኝ ብሎ ሸሽቷል። ሌላውም ደግሞ ተደምስሷል። ህወሓት ቡድን በተለይ በሰሜን የትግራይ አካባቢውን እንዲወጉ መሳሪያ አስታጥቆ እንደነበረም ብርጋዴር ጄኔራል ተስፋውን ከመግለጽ ባለፈ በነቂስ በመውጣት ሲቆጣጠር ነዋሪዎች ደስታቸውን ቀጥሏል። ለዚህ ደግሞ ምክንያት አለው።
Eagle News International will be right back. Please don't go away.
This portion is brought to you by RJK Services Manpower Agency Corporation.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
President or U.S. President-elect Joe Biden formally announced his top economic advisor. He will nominate former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen to lead the Treasury, topping a slate of economic officials who would break racial and gender barriers in the U.S. government. If they win Senate approval, Yellen would be the first female Treasury Secretary and would be joined in the executive branch by the first African Americans to serve as her deputy and as head of the White House Economic Council, as well as the first South Asian in a key budget role. Job number one for the 74-year-old, who previously made history as the first female Federal Reserve Chief from 2014 to 2018, will be helping the U.S. economy recover from the sharp downturn in growth and mass layoffs caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Unless lawmakers are able to overcome their differences in the closing weeks of the year, she will likely be tasked with convincing Democrats and Republicans in Congress to pass another spending bill to power the recovery amid a months-long deadlock in new aid.
The global economy may get back to pre-pandemic levels by the end of next year as vaccines help propel recovery. but growth is likely to be uneven according to the OECD. Signs that vaccines could now be weeks away from distribution have injected cautious optimism as the year limps to a close, with COVID-19 having claimed some 1.4 million lives. For the first time since the pandemic began, there is now hope for a brighter future, OECD Chief Economist Lawrence Boone wrote in her introduction to the organization's latest review of the global economic outlook. Progress with vaccines and treatment have lifted expectations and uncertainty has receded, she said, acknowledging that virus containment measures would likely be necessary for some months to come. The road ahead is brighter but challenging, Boone added. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development now sees world output dropping by 4.2% this year, thanks to the months-long lockdowns that slowed the spread of the coronavirus but threw a wrench into the global economy. But it forecasts the world economy to snap back with a 4.2% growth next year. China is likely to be the only major economy to escape a contraction this year, with its economy growing by 1.8% and then surging by 8% next year. On the other hand, the U.S. economy will contract by 3.7% this year, but is only likely to manage 3.2% growth in 2021. The Eurozone will make even less lost ground after a 7.5% contraction. In 2020, it's expected to grow just 3.6% next year. Japan is expected to fare similarly with a 5.3% contraction this year, followed by a 2.3% rise in 2021.
Exxon Mobil said Monday it will write down as much as $20 billion in assets as the oil giant slashes capital spending due to low oil prices amid the coronavirus pandemic. Exxon Mobil, which has reported losses the last 3 quarters, said it will account for $17 to $20 billion write-down in the 4th quarter based on shifting assets from the United States, Canada, and Argentina out of its development plan. Chief Executive Darren Wood said continued emphasis on high-grading the asset base through exploration, divestment, and prioritization of advantaged development opportunities will improve earnings power and cash generation and rebuild balance sheet capacity to manage future commodity price cycles while working to maintain a reliable dividend. The announcement is the latest sign of how the industry-wide downturn has dragged down Exxon Mobil, which was bumped from the prestigious Dow Index earlier this year. The company said last month it was cutting 15% of its global staff through 2022.
In a press briefing held on Tuesday, presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque said that the reopening of local tourism spots in the country is important for the economic recovery in the midst of the COVID-19 program. Secretary Roque also reminded the public to adhere to minimum health standards when in public places. Again, let's listen in.
Well, ang sa akin po, marami na pong nabubukas talaga ng mga tourist spots sa Pilipinas. At syempre po, hinahayaan natin magbukas yan dahil kinakailangan din ng ekonomiya. So I think we really have to balance it. No? Bigyan naman natin ng hanap buhay yung mga nasa sektor ng turismo. Pero gaya na aking sinasabi, no? Pwede naman po, at ito yung sinasabi ni Presidente, magmask, maghugas, mag-iwas.
The year 2020 should have been marked by a further reduction in poverty around the world, but instead, the COVID-19 pandemic has reversed decades of progress. According to estimates by the World Bank, up to 115 million people could be pushed into extreme poverty in 2020 as a result of COVID-19. Watch this.
es un poco contradictorio a la vez de, bueno, quédate en casa, pero también si te quedas en casa no tenés para comer, entonces o morís por el coronavirus o morís de hambre.
The recession has been deep, one of the deepest since the Great Depression, and for many developing countries and the people in the poorest countries, it is truly a depression, a catastrophic event, and it is continuing to add to the ranks of those in extreme poverty.
The number of people facing acute hunger levels have tripled in the past year. And 1.5 million people are now internally displaced, a 20-fold increase over 2 years. Lockdowns and other COVID-19 prevention measures have pushed an additional 6 million people in the region into extreme poverty.
Sí es triste vernos en esta situación donde estamos bien, donde podemos trabajar, donde podríamos salir a trabajar y en medio de la situación no lo podemos hacer.
Foi indispensável, a situação ficou difícil, porque eu moro com 3 filhos, eu sou sozinha para cuidar deles e por conta dessa pandemia eu fiquei desempregada. Tem dias que a gente deixa de até fazer uma refeição por dia por conta que a situação está difícil.
Les femmes sont particulièrement touchées par cette crise. Pourquoi? Parce qu'elles sont majoritaires dans les métiers les moins bien rémunérés, les plus précaires. Et donc, quand cette crise frappe, eh ben, ce sont elles qui sont les moins protégées. Et c'est un paradoxe parce que la crise a aussi révélé le caractère essentiel des métiers qu'elles occupent et de la place qu'elles occupent dans la société en termes de soins notamment.
J'ai perdu mon travail, mon job étudiant, donc ça m'aide comme tous les étudiants et encore je ne peux pas rentrer en Algérie aussi, donc je me dépanne un peu de partout pour vivre.
Malheureusement, pour l'instant, en tout cas, la réponse n'est pas à la hauteur du tout de l'enjeu. On est face à une crise massive, même sans la dramatiser plus que ça, qu'on n'a jamais connue depuis la Seconde Guerre mondiale. La réponse ne me semble pas du tout à la hauteur de l'ampleur de cette crise.
take a short break. Eagle News, we'll be back.
Is brought to you by Kubert, an expert in air conditioning and electromechanical. Also engaged in structural, electrical, fire protection, plumbing, and sanitary services. Kubert, your ultimate MEPS and air conditioning solutions.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
An 18-meter-high replica of a Gundam Robot comes alive at a media preview near the port of Yokohama. Take a look. Now, this is part of a project to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the animation series, and the public will be allowed to view the giant robot from December 19 after delays caused by the virus restrictions. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Katsunobu Kato told the news conference that he hoped that the tourist attraction would stimulate tourism demand and revitalize local areas. Gundam Factory Yokohama was previously scheduled to open in October, but it was postponed due to the pandemic. The site will be open until March 31, 2022. Visitors can climb to observation decks from 15 meters to 18 meters high on the dock tower to have close-up views of the anime icon, while the statue will take different poses every half an hour and it will be lit up in the evening. The robot is modeled after a figure in Mobile Suit Gundam, a Japanese cartoon first launched in the late 1970s.
Deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon surged again over the past year, hitting a 12-year high, according to official figures released Monday that drew a chorus of condemnation of President Jair Bolsonaro's government. A total of 11,088 square kilometers of forest was destroyed in Brazil's share of the world's biggest rainforest in the 12 months to August, according to the Brazilian Space Agency's PRODES monitoring program, which analyzes satellite images to track deforestation. That is equivalent to an area larger than Jamaica and was a 9.5% increase from the previous year, when deforestation also hit a more than decade-long high. Because of such deforestation, Brazil is probably the only major greenhouse gas emitter that managed to increase its emissions in the year the coronavirus pandemic paralyzed the global economy, said the Brazilian Climate Observatory, a coalition of environmental groups. Forests such as the Amazon play a vital role in controlling climate change because they suck carbon from the atmosphere. However, when trees die or burn, they release their carbon back into the environment. Bolsonaro, a far-right climate change skeptic, has presided over rising deforestation and wildfires since taking office in January last year. His government is pushing to open protected lands to mining and agribusiness and has slashed funding for environmental protection programs. Environmentalists say those policies fuel the destruction of the Amazon, about 60% of which is in Brazil.
And world champion Lewis Hamilton has tested positive for the coronavirus and will miss this weekend's Sakir Grand Prix in Bahrain, according to Formula One's governing body, FIA or FIA announces, in accordance with COVID-19 protocols and public health authority guidelines in Bahrain, Hamilton, is now isolating, according to their statement. Hamilton, who wrapped up his record equaling 7th World Championship in Turkey last month, is the third driver to have contracted the illness. Sergio Perez missed the British and 70th anniversary Grand Prix at Silverstone in August, while his Racing Point teammate Lance Stroll also tested positive following October's Eiffel Grand Prix in Germany.
A giant set of Olympic rings returns to Tokyo's waterfront after maintenance, with officials hoping the symbol will help build enthusiasm for the coronavirus postponed games. Watch this.
今関係者で安全安心な大会に向けて、今一生懸命取り組んでいるというところでございます。で今回このシンボルの設置を通じまして、より多くの皆様にはですね、来年いよいよ大会だということをより身近に感じていただければなというように感じております。この設置したシンボルですね、これは来年の大会までずっと展示をしておりますので、また感染症にも気をつけていただきながら、ご覧いただき、それによってまた大会をよりもういよいよ近づいてくるなということを感じていただければなと。
All right, Mike Tyson's return to boxing at the age of 54 ended in a draw with 51-year-old Roy Jones Jr. on Saturday in an 8-round exhibition battle of former heavyweight champions. Take a look.
I was just happy to be in there with him and just go to 8 rounds. That didn't mean nothing to me. The scorecards didn't mean nothing to me. The lack of fans didn't make anything of it. I was just happy to go the distance because I was used to doing it with the 3-minute round. So I said, why not just go the distance? Everybody know I can knock somebody out if I did. I think going the distance, that's real fighting. Well, what I'm doing in the ring, I realize is a gift not only for myself. Before it was all about me and the hot chick and the nice car and the planes and the boats, and it doesn't do it for me anymore. So I went another way. I don't know. I was just happy to be in there. I was just happy to be in there. I never think of myself as old. I think of myself as energy. I never say some 54-year-old guy, because some 54-year-old guy is going to come to the ring. I always say some energy is coming to the ring.
I really wanted to put on a show too and go for the W, but the show they must have. You know what I mean? So it's like you want to get a W, but you definitely want to put on a show. So I had to give them some of the razzle-dazzle hands down, you know. And it's like, you know, to me, the normal person would be stupid to be in front of Mike Tyson with their hands down. But that's who Roy Jones is. So I had to do it.
"15 years after retiring with a 2005 loss to journeyman Kevin McBride, Tyson made his comeback at Staples Center in Los Angeles without spectators in a pay-per-view matchup that mixed curiosity and nostalgia. California State Athletic Commission officials required 2-minute rounds instead of the usual 3-minute rounds, mandated larger than normal 12-ounce gloves, said neither fighter could seek a knockout, and declared there could be no official winner in safety moves for the over 50 fighters. Even with rounds cut to 2 minutes and bigger than usual gloves in safety moves ordered by state boxing officials, Tyson was able to produce more than enough punching power for Jones, who grabbed Tyson for much of the fight. Tyson says he has modest goals and simple needs these days, having long ago set aside the need for mansions, boats, cars, drugs, and a wild lifestyle, and now favoring his ability to raise funds for charities such as supporting needy youth.
Still still got it.
Yeah, still got it. And a nice way to reinvent himself. Because
Yes.
our generation knows him to be, into
Being the
drugs.
bad boy.
Bad boy. We all wanted to see that side of him. Well, that's it for tonight's
Teens now.
broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm CJ Hero. Please join us again tomorrow.
And before we go, I'd like to greet Sister Baby Manalo. A very happy birthday. Happy birthday po. And as usual, at the end of the day, as I always say, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
This program is supported by SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.